Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Mary Gardner, and I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about something that many people may not know all the details about and get confused about. And it usually is something that we think about at the very last minute. And it's probably a good idea to think about and consider what to do with our pets after they have passed, how we want to memorialize them, how we want what we want with their ashes, or do we not want their ashes, and things like that. And so I just thought it would be a good idea to jump out on this and talk about all the different options that are available to you, and just openly communicate about those options. Like I said, so many people are kind of nervous about talking about this. We're very death adverse in the United States. And I think it's really good, though, to just understand the options, plan, and that way you're prepared when the time does come to say goodbye. So first, let's just talk about burial. Back when I was growing up in rural New York, we buried all of our pets, and that was the normal thing to do. And to be quite honest, I don't think there was pet crematory in my area at the time. And really, pet cremation has only been kind of a thing for about 25 years. It's not been mainstream before then. Even human cremation is not really that long. It's been early 1900s is when it was much more popular, where burial was the primary option. So if you have the ability and you want to bury your pet, that is totally fine. But just so you know, you should always check with your state or city, your city or municipality regulations, because that could change. And we at Lap of Love, we don't know all of the different rules and regulations. So it's up to you to understand what your city ordinances are. For instance, I lived in Southern California, and in Orange County, California, you were not legally allowed to bury your pet. Do I know that people have? I know they haven't always gotten cremation, so the obvious is that they might be burying their pet. But also, I live now in South Florida, and it is not the same as it was in New York, where it was very easy in New York to prepare a burial site. Here in South Florida, I have a lot of coral rock, and so it's very difficult for the burial site to be built, and it's not something a lot of us consider. A lot of us New Yorkers move to Florida, we don't realize that. So hi Christina, hi Deb, please shout out where you're from too as well. So if burial is an option, we do have information on our website that we could send to you for the best ways to prepare your site. So it should be a certain depth. A lot of people ask how they should wrap their pet, and I always say just send something organic, so a blanket or something like that. My sister's dog, when we buried her, she went to Home Depot and got a kitchen cabinet, one of the cabinets, and turned it on its side, and it was like a little coffin. And so that was really nice. And so whatever your option, what you prefer, that's totally fine. Place flowers below, whatever. So that's burial. And again, just very important to understand your city ordinance, and also the feasibility of creating the best site. And I know that you might think, well, what if I move? And that's a question that, believe it or not, we get asked a lot. Is I'm now moving. What should, how can I dig them up? This has been a question. So just so you know, it is approximately 1 year that the body is reduced down to bones. So if, let's say, you buried your pet 5 years ago in the backyard, there's probably just bones. So yes, you can dig them up and then move them with you, or have the bones, brought to a crematory for, to turn into ashes, which I'll talk about. So if it's less than a year, I might be cautious because the process is not fully completed. So it does take, hi, Dania from Colorado. So burial, it's about a year. And the catalyst, so what reduces the body down to bones, is simply microbes, the soil, the pH in the soil, water in the soil. So it's just a very natural process, and so that's it. I just like to talk about it. I know some of you may not like this conversation, but I think it's good. Nobody talks about it. So let's talk about it here. Okay, so that is burial. By the way, no, your options for aftercare are yours alone, and no one is here to judge. If you want to bury your pet, it doesn't mean you love them less or anything. If you do not want their ashes returned, it doesn't mean that you don't love your pet, right? So this is all very personal, and there's no right answer to this. You're all right is actually the answer. Okay, so that's burial. Then we have cremation, and there are a number of options with the pet crematory space right now. So with cremation, we have the option of getting the ashes returned or having the crematory spread your pet's ashes for you. And also the type of crematory I'll also get into. Okay, so let's say that you would like the crematory to spread the ashes of your pet for you. That is called a communal or a group cremation, meaning your pet is not alone and they're with other pets in the machine. And those ashes, or the bones and the ashes, will then get spread however the crematory spreads those ashes for you. So you will not get your ashes back. There's not an so again, your pet will be with other pets. There could be, let's say, 10 other pets in the machine at one time. And so those machines are big. It doesn't mean that you can ask the crematory to just get a little bit, because you're getting a little bit of other people's pets, and we need to respect their wishes. If they know that my pet is going to be spread out to sea, let's say, which is fine. That's what we do here in South Florida. We spread them out to sea. If they think their pet is going to get spread out to sea, I certainly wouldn't want a little bit of their pet over at the Smith's house, right? So that is not an option to get a little bit from that mass cremation, okay? So, and that's totally fine. I know many people who do not want the ashes returned, and that is fine. The other option is the private cremation or individual cremation. So those words can be used interchangeably, private or individual, and I'll explain the difference. But that as a whole means that you're going to receive back your pet's ashes, and they will be your pet's ashes. That's the biggest question we get. How will I know it's my pet? And I'll tell you what we do when we're looking at crematories here at Lap of Love. So are you getting your pet's ashes back? Yes. And that is with the private or individual cremation. And so they are there's no other pets next to them. It is just your pet, and you're getting the ashes back. So now you ask, well, what's the difference between private and individual? To be honest, like I said, these words are used interchangeably, and even sometimes I can't remember which way is which, but there are the machines for a private cremation, and I'm gonna talk about fire cremation and aquamation in just a second. But the fire cremation machines are huge. They're like massive, like human machines. And it is what they call a retort. So the pet is placed in a retort. The fire source is it's in the middle, let's say, and there could be one very large retort, big, huge retort, or smaller little retorts. And those retorts are using the same fire source. Just as a little FYI, the fire source, the heat gets to about 1700 degrees. And so so that your pet is not touching flames, or I get that a lot. People ask that. They're not, it gets very hot in there. So those retorts, if they're the smaller ones, it is only your pet in the smaller one. And that's called the private. Some people say that's a true private. Then there are the machines that are much larger, and the pets may be placed on individual trays. So there may be, let's say, 4 pets at one time in this very large machine, but all separated. So they're not touching each other. Bones don't get transferred from one tray to another. There could be little half walls in between each of those stations, if you will. And that is what some people call individual. So again, you can see where the names get a little crossed of what's what. My own dog, when she was cremated in a fire crematory in Southern California, she was with 3 other pets, all separated, all on their own trays, little mini walls between them. And I was okay with that. I knew that I would get her ashes back because I knew how they tracked the system. And, to me, there was no difference than that her being in a tiny little retort by herself. And I felt some way and some comfort that there was others with her. I don't know. When you guys know, when you're in grief, you just, who knows what you think, right? So, okay, so that's the difference between the communal and the private or individual. So if you have any questions, pop them in there for me. So Dana says that all of her pets have been cremated and will be buried basically with her or after she's cremated at a pet crematory. So we get that asked a lot too. Like, can my pets be buried with me, like their ashes? And actually, that's also a state or city thing. And I've heard rumors that you can't. So just FYI. Okay. Now, the different types of cremation machines. So I mentioned the fire crematories. So that the catalyst for fire crematory is the heat source. So with burial, remember I said the catalyst is the pH of the soil, the water, the microbes and things like that. With cremation, the fire cremation, the heat source is the catalyst, and it gets up to about 1700 degrees. In burial, it's about 1 year. In fire cremation, it's a few hours. It depends on the size of the pet. So if you have a little kitty cat, it's much faster than, let's say, a St. Bernard. So a few hours it may take. Now, there's also something called aquamation. And many of you might have heard about this recently, more so because Desmond Tutu has elected for his body to be aquamated. And so aquamation is another type of cremation where the catalyst is alkaline water. And I myself personally learned more about this when I was living in Southern California. As you know, it's a very green state, and there was a couple of aquamation facilities near me. And some of my families had elected to, wanted to have their pet aquamated. And so I looked into this more. And about 3 years ago, my brother and I opened an aquamation facility here in South Florida. So in South Florida, we have Monarch Pet Memorial Services. I could pop the link URL in the comments just for you to see the website. But we only do aquamation. And I liked the concept of it. And what it is that the pets are placed into the machine, into the big machine, and they are separated in their own chamber. So they're separated by walls, and a number go in at one time, again, separated. Or if it's a communal where you're not getting the ashes back, there may not be any walls separating them. And what happens is the machine is filled up with water, and we use potassium hydroxide to elevate the pH. Now, I don't want to get too scientific here, but if you remember from science class, like neutral is around 7, and acidic things are less. Well, and then alkaline, basic things are more. The number is greater. So we add potassium hydroxide to make the pH of the water higher. It's about 13, let's say. So it's very basic. It mimics the soil pH. So the catalyst is this high pH number. And also the water is brought up to a temperature of about 198 degrees Fahrenheit, and it just circulates. So we turn on the machine, and that process actually takes about 22 to 24 hours. So it's a full day process. So it's not a very fast turnaround, and some people question that. But that process takes much longer than a fire crematory, but much shorter than burial. So now, fire or water cremation. So I hope I explained that okay. Actually, wait, before I go what I'm about to say, people always ask, well, what's left afterwards with aquamation? Well, what's left afterwards in the water is nothing. It's actually just peptides, and it goes down into the septic, or some aquamation crematories collect it, and it looks like tea, and it's used as fertilizer in some farms, but just because of the nitrogen. Just like when you bury your pet, some people say to bury them near a tree because of the nitrogen. Same concept. But there is no body parts. There's no DNA. There's no tissue or nothing in this fluid. It literally looks like tea, and that's it. It's pretty interesting, and it was used decades ago. It was decades ago, but not in the private sector. And now it's been much more popular in the last decade here in the private sector, and with humans too. So like I said, Desmond Tutu has elected for it. Okay, so now when your pet is cremated, whether it's fire or aquamation, what is left? So what is left is after the process. So whether, let's say, it's a few hours with fire cremation, or it's just a day with the aquamation, what is left is bones. Same thing if the burial is as well. So what's left are small fragments of bones. We will sometimes see, let's say, a femur, something like that. Sometimes the teeth are left behind. Little tiny wee teeth, they just crumble, but sometimes the larger teeth are left behind. But it is a pile of very, very fragile bones. And then for fire cremation, they need to be dried or cool. Sorry, they need to be cooled because it's very hot. So we pull them out. They pull them out with the tray, let them cool off for a couple of hours. With aquamation, they're wet, right? So it's aquamation. After the process for a day, the water's drained out, and then we take them out and put them on a tray to lay out to dry in either dehumidifiers. Some places have like heat lamps almost to heat them up, or even sometimes out in the sun, and we need to dry those bones. And that could take a day, sometimes even 2 days. I live in South Florida, like I said, and it's very humid here. So that humidity slows the drying process. It's like putting your laundry out. Like it takes forever for a towel to dry by your poolside even. Same concept. So that is why it takes a little bit longer even with aquamation. So the bones have to dry. Now, what happens to the bones afterwards? The next step along the way is to turn those bones into what you get, the ashes. And so there's a machine that reduces then those bones down to small particulate, what you see like beach sand. So they get down into beach sand. So both of them are left with bones, dried or cooled, and then we turn them into the sand, into the ashes or sand. It's like sand. And then they're almost 100% of the time, they're placed in a plastic pouch of some sort, whether it's tied with a tie, it might be even air sealed. It just all depends on the crematory. There's no right or wrong. At our crematory, I actually tie them with a ribbon tie because some people want to go in and take some out to give to other people or put into a necklace or something like that. And if I sealed it, it'd be very difficult to open and then reseal. So we've decided to not seal them like that, but they are sealed with the tie. So then that is placed into the urn. So if you have your urn and you would like to get a different urn, or like I said, take some out to get, to make into a jewelry piece or whatever it may be, or some people have put their ashes into a tattoo. You can open the urn and they will be in a pouch inside. It's not just going to be like your ashes are your pet's ashes are loose, if you will. So they're going to be inside. So I get a lot of questions about, so I think I covered everything, but let me know. Shoot me a question if I didn't. Some people ask about, well, this doesn't look like enough ashes for my pet, or this looks like more than my other pet, and they were both the same size. Well, remember, the only thing that's left behind is bone. And so body fat is gone. So if you've had a one dog that had more muscle or fat than the other, or fat rather than the muscular dog, their size might look bigger and you think you're going to get more back, but it's really just bone, and the density of the bone changes between people, species, gender, all that stuff. So you could have two identical cats and one just has a higher density bone. So it's nothing to be concerned with if you think that one is, a couple of ounces or a pound heavier or something like that. That is a normal process. So I'm just trying to read some of these comments too. All just wonderful comments. Thank you, Marilyn. Okay, so the other question I get is, what color are the ashes? They look a little bit different. And they're usually very ivory colored. Sometimes they could be a little bit darker. With fire cremation, if you've wrapped your pet in, let's say, their blanket, or they have a toy with them, sometimes the dye from those materials could get into the bones and the ashes and just change it just a little bit. With aquamation, we can't actually have those products or those items destroyed. They don't cremate. So they're what's left behind. So we would have a wet towel or a toy. So they don't. The aquamation only cremates organic material. So if you have a toy that your pet is going with, we actually will have the toy just follow your pet throughout the journey. So they'll go from the crematory machine into the to the drying area and stuff like that. So, and then you would get that toy back if you wanted it. So, so sometimes materials that are with your pet may change the color. What about metal? So let's say your dog has had knee surgery. Those metal little screws and stuff like that in both fire and aquamation will be left behind. They could be such a wee little wire. I remember one time there was a little Yorkie, and this is when I was in general practice, and we had a little wee tiny wire for a knee surgery, and it didn't come back because it was so tiny that it melted. So it was 1700 degrees, right? So that little wire just melted. And the owner was very worried that it wasn't her pet because she didn't get the wire back. But that wasn't the case. It just melted. But the bigger pieces, and some crematories give it back, some don't. Some people don't want to see it. Like, we don't always know what everybody wants. And so some do and some don't. Let's see. What are some other questions that I normally get? Oh, the big one. How will I know it's my pet? So it is very important that your veterinarian or, you know, or the hospital properly identifies your pet. And we are really very careful about that. We want to make sure that if, you know, Sam that's my girl. I use my girl's name. So Sam is properly identified and tracked throughout the system. So almost many of our crematories that we use actually have software systems. So each pet gets identification number. Some even have little barcodes, and that's okay. We've had one person complain because they saw a little barcode on their bag, but that's actually a way to track them. So at my crematory, we have little QR codes, and we don't put that on the bag, but you know, because I know that might upset people, but they are tracked. They're getting scanned between every single step. And so at our crematory, if we need to still do a paw print, we won't cremate until we do that paw print, and our system tracks that. Our system knows what retort they're in. So when we remove a pet, we know whose bones these are. So it's very systematized and well respected. And so it's good that these systems are in place. Some crematories have little metal tags, almost like a dog tag, if you will. And that tag's got a serial number on it, and that follows that pet all throughout. So even if they don't have a really, you know, big software system, that tag is actually a really good way to make sure that the pet follows the pet, and we know that pet is going back to their home. So let's see. Don't forget to put in your questions. Now, some people might want to bring their pet to the crematory themselves. And do you have the option? Just so you know, even with Lap of Love or your veterinary clinic, if you have a particular crematory that you want to use and that it might not be what we use, that's fine. And you can bring your pet to them themselves. Or a lot of these crematories will have pickup. So if it's a very large pet, or you're not able to bring them to the crematory, you can arrange pickup. You just should know about when they're open, what are their hours, what are their fees to come pick up, and things like that. So that is always an option. And for us, when we do our due diligence of all of our crematories, every single Lap of Love veterinarian is required to go visit the crematory. We want to make sure that they would feel comfortable visiting or their own pet being cremated by that crematory, right? So if I'm not comfortable with Sam going into that crematory, then I'm not going to recommend that to the families. So we want to make sure what their policies are, how they treat the pets, what their tracking system is. Are they private? Are they individual? Just so that way we know. And then also, what are the urn options? And we like to choose a nice, simple urn because there's so many out there. There's on Etsy and a million other places. You can get amazing urns out there and switch them if you prefer. One of my pets, I went to one of those ceramic painting places, and it was like a cookie jar. And I did all this painting of, you know, her favorite things. And I moved her ashes from the wooden urn into the ceramic that I made. Everybody has their own preference. So I feel like I forgot to mention something, but what else is there? I think that's it. So again, whatever your preference is totally fine. If you would like to bury we can send you some information, but again, check with your ordinances. If you don't want the ashes returned, that's fine. I don't even like saying don't want them returned. If you want the crematory to spread them for you, the crematory, depending on where the crematory is and what the laws are of that location, will determine where they're allowed to spread them. Some can spread them in a memorial garden. Some are out to sea. Some, they just have to dispose of them because of the laws in that area. So it's okay to learn about that and just know. And then, of course, the private cremation or individual to get them back. So I think that's it. If there's any other questions, I see a lot of you are on here. So Marilyn says she's used Lap of Love twice and wouldn't do it any other way. So much better. I agree with you. Much better. But I do encourage you to think about your options before you have to say goodbye, because when you're in the middle of saying goodbye and you don't know what to do, like that could be very nerve-wracking. The other thing too is about viewing options. So some people want to watch their pet being placed into the retort. Totally fine if that's what you wish to do. Not every crematory is set up for insurance-wise for you to be in the back with those machines. So even with an aquamation, we can't have that, and also it's a whole day process. So you'd be sleeping there. If it's only an hour, 2 hours, sometimes they have a room with a window or a camera so you could watch it. Everybody's different. And it's usually because they either want to ensure that it's their pet going in, or it's a part of their grieving process. And then some would like just one more viewing, but usually when you're able to say goodbye in the home, that is kind of our memorial service, if you will. And so the last thing, I knew I'd forget something, is how long does it take? So if you were counting with me, with fire crematory, it could be very fast depending on the size of the pet, when the crematory gets the pet, how many pets they have to cremate before them. We have some places where it's such a fast turnaround, it's almost within 2 days, and others it might take a week to 2 weeks. And sometimes because of the engraving, they have to send out to an engraver to get the plaques engraved. So there's so much to this process. So don't get nervous if your pet is returned super fast or it takes a little bit longer. It's just the area, the situation, things like that. With aquamation, it is usually going to be very close to 2 weeks, if not even sometimes a little bit more, because if you think about the process along the way, we have to make memorial items, so paw prints and things like that. But the process is a full day. The drying could take up to 3 days. Then we have to turn the bones into ashes, and then we engrave the machine. So by the time we get them, it could take up to 2 weeks. So please don't get concerned about the time. Okay, I've got some questions. I love how the urn came back engraved with my sweet boy's name on it, Lori. Exactly. Hi, Mandy. Great. So Deborah, I lost both my cats 6 months of each other. The hardest thing, I want my ashes, the cat's ashes, to come with me, but I have no family or friends to make sure this happens. What do I suggest? Deborah, this is a good question. Before I hit your question, you said 2 cats, and I think this is a good one to talk about too, is can you have their ashes put together? So if your pets are cremated at the same time, so maybe you've said goodbye to more than one pet at the same time, you can actually ask to have both pets together and have their ashes put together in an urn. So this is just something you have to communicate with us, with the crematory. It'll be still this, same charge for each of them. But that is something that we're asked often to do. Okay, so so back to Deborah's question. This is a good one, and I would suggest speaking to your. They have been cremated. Okay, so they're separate. So Deborah says they're separate. I would definitely talk to your attorney to make sure that it is in your will of what to do with their remains. I do want to say, I would be worried about where you live if you are allowed to be buried with your pet's ashes. I can tell you it's not legal in many areas. So ask your lawyer and make sure that it's a part of your will and estate to get done. If not, maybe spreading them somewhere special beforehand or something like that, or turn them into a diamond to make sure that you're buried with your diamond. That could be good, or put into a necklace or something like that. I don't know. I have a little bit of 6 of my pets' ashes getting turned into a diamond. I did a video of it a couple of months ago. And so hopefully that will go with me. But so maybe putting it in something that not everybody knows, but your cat's ashes are large. So definitely something to talk to an attorney about. So Constance says, I didn't see an option for engraving. Any suggestions on how to get one done? So with Lap of Love, I'm pretty certain that all of our pets that are cremated will have either a nameplate on it. My crematory, we etch the name in the wooden urn at the top. So just depends. Some crematories do that too, but it's usually with a nameplate. Like I said, that needs to go out to an engraver. The nameplates come back and are stuck onto the urn. So if you didn't get one, Constance, and you use Lap of Love, certainly give us a shout, and we can get that nameplate for you. We have one crematory where they don't actually adhere or stick the nameplate onto the urn because they like to give the families an option. Do they want it on the side or on the top? And we've had some people complain about that because they think it should be stuck on. But I understand why they do that, because some people, if they put it on a bookshelf, they want the nameplate on the side, and some want it on the top. We're all so different, right? So again, something to think about as well if they're able to make that change. But cremation is a very important process along the way, because we want to make sure everything is good. So it's hard to sometimes say, hey, can I get a change? But definitely something to ask. Okay, so you used this back in March. Definitely, if you did not get a little engraving, you call us and you tell them Dr. Mary said to call. So let's see. Okay, so Marianne said she's always been skeptical about the group cremation. So, I just like to be open and honest with you. There's nothing wrong with that. They're just with other pets and their ashes are spread. However, legally, the crematory is allowed to spread them. I know that so many people, we don't want to hear reality. We don't want to hear what's going on. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's okay if you want your pet to be cremated with others and that their ashes are spread out and because you're not attached to those ashes, totally fine. I know some of you might have 10 urns sitting in your house and you're like, I don't need any more urns. It's not that you don't love this pet, but you don't know what to do with those. So find out ways that you can spread them if you want to. Maybe take a little bit of each of them and put them into little teeny bags and then have one urn, something like that. And good. I'm glad I could help. All right. So if there's no more questions, I hope this was helpful to give you an idea of what happens. Like I said, I have a crematory in South Florida called Monarch Pet Memorial Services, and you can check it out. And that's for the aquamation. That's not available in many locations. So if you're in an area and you're like, I want aquamation, and it's not our fault. They're just not out there. There's, I don't even know how many, maybe 50 in the whole United States. I really don't know that answer. So I just made that number up. I just know of about 50. And so it's not very common. But if there is a crematory in your area and you specifically want to use them and we don't use them, it's okay. You can make arrangements to have them brought to the crematory yourself, or like I said, have them pick up. All right, everybody. So Marilyn said that they kept their ashes and she loved the lake and swimming, so we spread her ashes there. I love it. That's why I love to hear little stories of where they go. And again, nothing is wrong. So I hope this was helpful. Until next time, everybody, it's lovely to see you. Thank you so much for all of your comments. And in the meantime, love up on your gray muzzles and your geriatric kitties. Take care.